Hey, fellow authors, welcome to the show. This is Active Offer 30. I'm Mark with MJ Hulbert Books, and today my guest is Diana Xarissa. Diana is a cozy mystery author. She got started back in 2013, in which she terms were the Wild West days of independent publishing. She's been full-time since 2015, has over 100 books now for sale on Amazon. Her main focus is cozy mystery, but she also talks about cozy mystery adjacent, and I'll let her explain that. One of her series is the Aunt Betsy Mysteries. So that gives you some idea. If you love cozy mysteries, you want to check out Diana. And without further ado, I'm going to start our chat. Thank you for coming. Go
Sorry, I
ahead,
got there
Sally.
late. I was just going to let Diana know that my other life, I have a farm, and we were working on the farm this morning and ran a bit longer than we needed to. So that's why I was late.
Sally's just published her first book. It's a historical fiction
Yeah.
set around World War One and the aftermath in Australia.
Yeah. So
Congratulations on the first book. The first book is the most exciting.
Right, and then it becomes a lot of hard work, right? I found the whole process of publishing really interesting. This manuscript had sat in my hypothetical bottom drawer for 4 or 5 years, and finally I've got a couple people saying, "Sally, you got to put it out." So I did so, and Mark's advice to me is really the best thing you can do immediately after your first book is to launch your second one. And I do, in fact, have a second one. That's in the fiction world as opposed to nonfiction. Was that your experience originally too? I don't doubt you, Mark. I'm pretty sure you're a good guy. But tell me, and excuse me eating my lunch too. I just got back. I'll try to be off screen for that part.
I am not bothered that you're eating your lunch. You do what you need to do. Nothing sells book one like book two. And that is really the basis of my marketing strategy. And I say that because I write long series and I publish monthly, not all in the same series. I have 3 active series at the moment. By the end of this year, I'll have 6. Wow. And I rotate them. So it'll be series A in January, series B in February, series C in March, and then start over again. Next year it's going to be all over the place because I'm going to have 6 different series. So I'm going to have books from, this is all theoretical. I'm just planning next year, but yeah, the thing is, particularly depending on your genre, but particularly in cozy mystery, we have a lot of whale readers and they want to see that you're going to write a lot of books. They're not even going to pick up book 1 until you've got 3 or 4 titles because they're not going to invest their time in your characters unless they know they're going to get a lot of stories. Mm-hmm. So I write alphabetically, so people always know what order to read the books in. So I write 26 book series. That's long series. If you can get a reader to invest in book 1 and stay with your characters for 26 books.
Wow.
It's a lot easier to sell 26 books to one person than one book to 26 people.
I see what you're saying. How long are your books on average?
So the original series was 70 to 75K. Mm-hmm. I did a novella series at 25K, and now I'm writing my sort of full-length stuff is coming in closer to 50. Mm-hmm. Which is a little bit faster to write. And I take the hit on the KU page reads because the books are shorter, but I can write them faster. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah. Wow. So you store up 6 series worth of characters in action in your head at once. So that's what you're working towards, right? That's crazy.
You know what? There are so many people living in my head. There are so many stories in there that I want to write and I'll never find the time to write.
Yeah. Well, so it's not bad for you.
Yeah, so
that's great. What is a whale reader? Is that what you said?
Oh, yeah. Whale readers are just readers who read a lot of books. Like, I have readers that will get the book at midnight and finish it before I get out of bed the next morning. There are readers who are reading 2-3 books a week. Some of them are reading a book a day. They're the
Wow.
ones that are heavily invested in Kindle Unlimited
Mhm.
and use their subscription to the max to read all the time. A lot of my readers are retired.
Mhm.
And this is what they use their retirement to do. They sit and they read, and particularly during the pandemic, they read, but
Sure.
everybody was reading during the pandemic. But yeah, so a whale, I don't think that I think I got the term from 20 books to 50K, actually, whale readers, but they're just the readers who read. They're particularly strong in romance. There
Mhm.
are a lot of whale readers in romance who will sit and read, but I mean, I have readers who'll read my entire back catalog, 100 books over the course of a month, and, email me about them.
Mhm.
My goodness. That's a whale reader, definitely.
Mhm.
But I used to read like that before I wrote. Like, I used to read constantly, and when I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time, and so when the kids were napping, I was reading. I was also writing, because I always wrote, but I wrote for my own, just because I felt like I had stories to tell. I never planned to do anything with them. But then I read all the time.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
When did you first know you were a storyteller?
Sorry.
Okay.
I was thinking about this earlier today. I didn't have the happiest of childhoods. And I spent a lot of time in my room living in my imagination, because that was a safe place to be. And I could imagine things that were better than what was going on around me. I feel like I've been writing stories in my head since I understood stories existed, since I read my first C Spot Run book. I grew up on Nancy Drew and all of the great classic mystery authors. So those were always what I loved to read. And I would write a lot. I have boxes from my mom of short stories that I typed on her old manual typewriter. And then years of hard drives full of crappy stories nobody would ever buy, but story after story. But I'm not good at rejection.
Mhm.
At this conversation this morning was a mastermind group of cozy authors, and I said, and we agreed that the rejection part of it is the bit that, like, I would write a book or a story or something, and I would send it off to either an agent or a magazine or a publisher, and I would get that rejection letter, and then I would not write for months.
Oh,
And it
wow.
only took one rejection letter to convince me that I couldn't write and I shouldn't write. And so, I mean, I never had a chance traditionally where you're slogging for years, putting your books out in front of people and trying to get someone to look at them. I submitted a short story for an anthology recently, and they turned it down. And I still spent 3 days feeling like I can't write. This is crazy, and so I still don't do rejection very well.
Even though you're as successful as you are, you still have that insecurity.
Yeah.
Wow.
Imposter syndrome does not go away.
Mhm. Mhm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I never really, I knew from the beginning when I first started submitting that I was going to get rejected. So I guess I had that mindset that it was going to happen no matter what I did. So I never let it bother me. But you mentioned, putting the stories in your head. It reminded me of an interview I saw with Nora Roberts. And somebody asked her that question, and she goes, well, she was like 10 or 11 when she realized not everybody was creating stories in their head. She was just normal to her. And I think it's the way most of us are. We writers, it's just a natural thing,
Mhm.
So how did you get started finding your readers? Did you use social media? Did you advertise?
So now we're going back in time to 2013, 2014. And it was a really different landscape in terms of finding readers and publishing, self-publishing. I don't know how else to say it. I kind of got lucky, and I got a lot of word of mouth. There was no Facebook advertising. There was no AMS advertising. BookBub wasn't around when I started. Basically, there was a bunch of indie authors wandering around going, anybody know how to do this? I don't know how to do this. Do you know how to do this? And I put out everything in my bottom drawer, basically. I put out a bunch of middle grade books, fantasy adventure. I love the stories. I wrote them for my kids. Nobody wanted to buy them. I mean, middle grade is a hard sell now. It was an impossible sell in 2013.
Were you doing this on Amazon?
Yeah, on Amazon. I have a mystery thriller series set in the not too distant future. I put 3 or 4 books in that. Put 3 books out in that to crickets. I had some romance novels. I put those out. I was doing my own covers in Kindle Cover Creator. My sister was editing as a personal favor. She's a grammar Nazi, so that was good. But she was doing it as a favor. And I was literally just throwing everything I had out there and crossing my fingers, which isn't a great approach. I don't recommend it. And then I decided to write a cozy, and that's a whole other story. But hang on, my computer's just trying to get me to do something here. Go away. Okay. So I wrote the first cozy, and the only thing I did smart in terms of promotion or anything was that I did a Goodreads giveaway. Now, in those days, they were free. And I gave away 2 paperback copies. And the cool thing about a Goodreads giveaway, and I think this is still the case, but in those days, if people entered your contest, they were encouraged to list your book, to put your book on there to be read shelf. So what it meant was the several hundred people who entered to try and win the book all said they were going to read this book. Now, I don't know if any of them ever did, but it looks good for your credibility on Goodreads if you've got a bunch of people with your book on there to be read list, right? The other thing I did, again, we're in early 2014, so it was a totally different place, but I joined a lot of Goodreads groups for cozy mystery readers. And I interacted there as a reader because that's what I've been reading my whole life. And a lot of the groups had separate sections for writers that you could go in and talk about what you were working on. So I put my covers up there. I said, look, here's 4 different covers I'm looking at. Which ones do you like? I took a vote. I put my blurb up there and I said, what do you think of this? Would you buy this book? And I really got actively engaged with the people there. I found some beta readers there and I said, look, would you read my manuscript? And they were, oh yeah, okay. So when the book actually came out, I had all these people with the book on their TBR list, and I had people on Goodreads who knew who I was. And then I released it 99 cents. And I went on the Goodreads groups and I said, hey, it's out. If anybody wants to read it, it's 99 cents. And I sold 10 copies on release day, and I was doing cartwheels all around my house.
Yeah. Right.
And then literally from there, it was word of mouth. That's about the only thing. But word of mouth and, oh my gosh, people are buying this book. I got to write book 2. So book 2 came out 2 months later. And then the same month that book 2 came out, Amazon introduced pre-orders for indie authors because they didn't have those before that. Yeah. And they gave you 90 days. So I put book 3 on a 90-day pre-order, and I wrote morning, noon, and night until I finished book 3. And then that set the schedule for that series. I released a new book every 90 days for 26 bucks, basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you pretty much do it all yourself, or have you hired a PA now?
I don't have a PA. I work with 3 different editors. I work with a brilliant cover artist who does amazing things. I still do some of my own covers. I should get a PA. I really should. My husband is getting close to retirement age, and I keep teasing him that he's going to be doing all of it for me pretty soon, but he's not keen on the idea. But no, I still, every email I get, I answer myself, and aside from the really rude ones. And, I think I would miss that. I love talking to my readers. If I could do that all day and not write, that'd be okay too.
Yeah.
But then you don't have readers, do you?
Right.
You must make a distinction between really rude emails and rejection. because you just laughed that off. I'm interested to know what difference you're making.
So 3 or 4 books into the series, I got an email from a young man who said, I don't get it. Your covers suck. Your blurbs are just so, and your reviews are mediocre. Why are you selling more books than I am?
I would have loved that. I would have framed it.
So I went and I looked him up on Amazon, and this was the Wild West days when there was a lot of gray hat and black hat things going on. And it was very easy to tell when I looked at his books that he was buying his reviews and buying certain, and I was just like, I am not even going to dig, and I really wanted to write back and say, maybe I'm writing books people actually want to read, but I didn't. I just left it there. And, so I don't reply to those, and I don't reply to all the endless sales pitchy,
Right.
We'd love to promote your book and all that. But genuine people, even if they're complaining, get a response. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I explain, why I've made certain choices. Sometimes they just hate my books, in which case I say, thanks for trying it and have a lovely life. And
yeah. Well, you probably have some word of mouth, though, would operate for you there, because people love when writers are accessible like that. So I'm sure that's working for you well, too.
Yeah.
That's great. Do you find that when you start a book, and especially when you're writing on this high speed basis, is it already sort of planned out in your head? How much planning and plotting do you do?
So we had this conversation this morning in my other group, and I have a really high level idea. Like I'll try and give you an example that doesn't actually relate to any of my books, but it'll be like, Bessie's going to find the body here, and it's going to be this guy that went missing 6 months ago, and here's the suspects and how they're related to him. And then I number 1 to 15 because I write 15 chapters in a book. I need that structure. It sounds really, I know people who write every chapter is as long as it needs to be, and then they break. So some chapters are 2 pages and some are 20 pages. I write exactly, not to the word, because I know somebody that does that too, but I write, if I'm writing 50K, I write 3,300 words per chapter for 15 chapters. Mm-hmm. And so I'll write 1 line for each chapter. So it'll be, obviously there's a sort of introductory chapter where it starts, usually they find the body by the end of it, if it's a murder. And then I'll just list sort of the key things that need to happen. Particularly when you're writing long series, certain things will have to happen in a book. For instance, Grace gets pregnant in book 6. By book 16, she needs to have that baby. So at some point, I got to write that baby in. We've had weddings, we've had divorces, we've had, so all those things need to be in there. So I make sure that I list those things on my little outline. But then when I start writing, and the more books I write, the more true this is becoming, the story just kind of goes off on its own and writes itself over here, and the outline's over here going, hi, what about me? And I'm like, yeah, never mind. So now what I usually do is when I finish writing for the day, I will leave myself notes for the next couple of chapters. Mm-hmm. So it'll be, this needs to happen and that needs to happen. And don't forget that you made a date with so-and-so, because I've been known to get to the end of the book and then realize that she'd made plans with somebody in chapter 2 and never followed through. So I try not to let that happen, but so I think planning was a lot more important when I first started out. And then the more I write, the more I trust the process to work itself through my head and get where it needs to be in my word count.
Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Well, you mentioned that like a 15 chapter, and it sounds a little bit like this book I was kind of reading right now. It's called Save the Cat. It's about the structure of a story and how certain things need to happen along the way, and every story is structured that way, which was news to me. But if you apply it to stories that you've read and you go through it and go, yeah, it does. It kind of follows this certain pattern. Great stories all follow a certain pattern.
I do that instinctively. I try not to study craft books. It sounds terrible, and I shouldn't even say that out loud, but I'm afraid if I learn that I'm doing it wrong, I'm going to try and fix it, and then
Right.
people aren't going to want to read my books anymore.
Well, I just want to interject just quickly. I don't argue with success, okay? If you're successful, don't change.
I started my first one not having done this before. I have written for most of my professional life, but not fiction. It's, just writing was what I was doing on contract with other people or agencies. So the sitting down and writing part was not a challenge. What I didn't know was how to school myself to get ready for a not nonfiction story. So I was quite disciplined with the first one and really enjoyed the process. And in fact, as I was planning it, I would sort of imagine a bit of the dialogue, and I discovered when I went to write it that I had quite a lot of it already written. So that was cool. The second one, I kind of started out that way and did a little bit less. And I've discovered on the third one, in all of these, the characters have taken over, and characters I'd never thought of have come in. And I always talk about imposter syndrome. I had always assumed that only happened to real writers because I read about that. So on this third one, not only has that happened, but the story, interestingly, is sort of evolving in a way that's keeping a few things secret from me. It's really hard to describe, but I've got it's two different time. It's not time travel, but I've got two different time periods, and the link between them. I mean, I would normally say, I just haven't figured out a link yet, but I've come to trust the process enough that I know there's a link, just hasn't been revealed to me yet. So I don't know. I tell you that story about a much less experienced fiction writer than you are, to see if there's anything that sort of rings a bell with you in how you do things.
Oh, absolutely. Like you said, trust the process, trust your brain to be sometimes there will be, like you said, that you've got to find a way to link these two. Sometimes those trickier things will tick away in the back of your brain, and then all of a sudden you'll be like, oh, of course, how could I not know that was coming? I'll tell you a funny story. My very first cozy, I plotted it. Like I laid it all out. I knew exactly what was happening. I knew everything. And I got to chapter 14 of 15, and I realized that I was wrong about the killer.
No.
It wasn't who I thought it was. And I went, hang on a minute. So I'm like 13 chapters full of story, and it's all wrong. I didn't have to change anything because, I mean, the story still made sense, but everybody that reads it always is like, oh, well, I thought Vicky did it. And I said, yeah, so did I. Turns out it wasn't.
That's great. That's reassuring, actually.
I had another one where there was a character visiting the island with an entourage. And when I was writing out the notes, I said, someone in the entourage dies. And I was going to figure it out when I started writing. And I got to the end of the chapter, and I killed off the person that I really wanted to not die. And I was like, wait a minute, why did that person die? Hang on, what's going on here? So you can surprise yourself, and you can find yourself in places you never expected to be. Mm-hmm. Like you said, the characters have a way of becoming. The very first cozy, I had a minor character literally supposed to appear in opening scene and disappear from the book. Like I had no plans for this guy. He's now one of the 4 main characters in the entire series. He became so important because as I got to know him, I found out that he's like this really great person. Like I introduced him as no one would ever call him the brightest man in the room, because he was just like this sort of dopey police constable. But by the end of it, I sort of fell in love with him as a person. And then I decided, okay, well, he's young and single. He's going to date a different woman in every book. That'll be fun, right? Mm-hmm. So he starts dating this woman in the next book. Well, they're now married with a child and another one on the way, because I liked them too much together. And he was so happy with her that I couldn't break him up.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, that's really sort of taking it all on board, isn't it? That's really fun to hear, because I had not expected to enjoy the writing process so much. When I went across to fiction, I figured, well, I'll give this a whirl and see what happens. And I just get lost. And I was once I think it was just in an airport lounge, waiting area. And my husband came back from whatever, getting a bagel or something, and said, wow, you really can write anywhere. It takes 2 sentences for me. I don't need a room of my own. I've written in a car dealership. I've written on planes. I've written in waiting areas, every room in my house, outside. I'm transported into this world where people are telling their stories. The first one of mine was on I sort of borrowed my maternal grandparents' story from World War I and built upon it. It's not exactly, but close enough. And my elder brother, when he read it, he said, I really love this, but why didn't you ever let character X forgive character Y before she died? And I said, without any thought at all, I said, she arrived with her story. I couldn't change it. That was what happened, which I wouldn't have known at the point where she arrived. I had no idea, but her story was attached. And it's just like, I keep using this word reassuring. I thought I was a little crazy, but it sounds like all I'm doing is just,
we're all a little.
in my head.
Yeah.
We are crazy, right?
We are crazy. Yeah.
No, definitely the story writes itself. I'm just there to put the words together. Except for once in a while, I had a mother and son that I had written that were like the love interest of my hero, and I killed them off in a battle. And my editor begged me not to do it. He was, please don't do that. Bring her back. And so I did. And I'm glad I did, because she went on to carry another storyline, another thread through the stories. But generally, it's like you guys said, it's just like the story writes itself. I may think it's going to go in this direction, but I never really know.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time it writes itself. I will confess there have been books where it has been a struggle from page 1 to page whatever, and for whatever reason the story is just not flowing. I still write it. I still write, and I sit down and I make the story appear, and usually by the middle to end of it, it's coming together and I'm starting to get into my stride. Sometimes it's because I've messed something up at the beginning and I don't realize till I'm halfway through that actually it would make more sense if X and Y were related or not related, or there was something, sometimes I don't know where it's going well enough to get the story to work. The first time it happened, I was panicking that people are going to read this book and they're going to be like, this is terrible. She clearly didn't enjoy this book. But I found that some of the books that I've not enjoyed as much, my readers love. And some of the ones that I feel like have just flown out of my head, like brilliantly, my readers are like, meh. So I've learned that I'm not a good judge of my own work. So I put the same effort into every single book, and I love the ones that just flow, but I make myself work on the ones that don't. I still have my stories to tell, and my readers have certain expectations that they're going to get a certain number of books every year, and I do my best to meet those expectations.
You mentioned that you do like 3 series, like you do one book in the series and you switch to a different series, and I wonder if that maybe helps with that, because I just finished a 3rd book in one of my series, and I did them 1, 2, 3 all in a row, and that last 3rd book was just, it took me 6 months to write it, and the other 2 combined took me 2 months, 2.5 months between the 2 of them. And I think it's because I tried to do 3 in a row and I just got fatigued with that storyline.
But according to Diana's formula, your readers are going to love that book, and not more than they liked your other ones, right?
Well, I can hope.
I should clarify. I publish them alternating, but I write them in chunks. So I will write all of the books in the Bessie series for next year in one right after another. So I'll write 3 or 4 books for this series, and then I'll write 3 or 4 books. But I work a year ahead. I don't know if I said this yet. I work a full calendar year ahead. So right now I am working on the books for 2023. and I have a written schedule of what I would like to publish next year. And I am taking them off as I get through them. And I started with my existing series, and I did 3 books for Bessie, and I did 2 books for Fenella, and I'm working on 3 books for Janet. And then I'm going to do a couple of books in each of the new series, hoping that they're going to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And but the beauty of working a year ahead is if I don't finish all of them, I can adjust the schedule. The schedule's not carved in stone. It's on my whiteboard, ready to be erased as necessary.
You haven't broadcast it to anybody.
And one thing that the pandemic taught me was that flexibility, that being a year ahead is really important. So when you're used to working in a nice quiet house and suddenly 3 other people are in it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it becomes impossible to concentrate and you take some time off, what happened in 2020 is my 2021 schedule got adjusted, but my 2020 schedule, everything still got published as planned. I ended up canceling a couple of books that I had hoped to put out in 2021. But none of my readers never knew that. It never was a thing for them because none of those had been announced yet. So
that's interesting.
Speaking to Sally, to the Write Everywhere thing, that was me. I do that, and I did that a lot when my kids were younger and I was mom taxi. My laptop went everywhere with me, or I took a book I was editing with me. My daughter used to do a math class for 3 hours every Monday and Wednesday. And I used to go, and she was at the university here. I used to take my laptop, find a quiet corner, and just write for 3 solid hours. I mean, it was fantastic for my word count. But then I used to edit in the back of Taekwondo. I used to edit at, everywhere I go. Now I still do. I was at the doctor's this morning to have blood taken at the lab place. Anyway, I went to have blood taken. I didn't make an appointment, so they made me wait because they do. And so I just sat there and I edited, and I just sat there all afternoon. Like, I don't care how long it takes. You can make me wait. That's one of the keys to the productivity level that I'm at, is you have to, it's not just a 9 to 5. I don't work 9 to 5, but it's having that ability to take whatever you're working on with you and pick up a bit, a couple thousand words here. Back in the day, I used to type on my phone. I used to take a wireless keyboard with me and sit and type on my wireless keyboard into a long email to myself, and then email it to myself, and then I would cut and paste that into my document the next morning before I could afford a laptop to.
Wow. Well, are all your series in the same genre? And I apologize if you talked about this earlier, or Mark knows already. I don't.
So under Diana Xarissa, I write cozy mystery and cozy adjacent mystery. I write traditional cozies, what used to be called cozy 10 years ago and is now called traditional mystery, because cozies have evolved into something that involves cats and recipes and quirky witches. And it's kind of the genre has moved. What I write is more Miss Marple, Jessica Fletcher kind of cozies. Like, a few people have pets, but the pets aren't, and I don't include recipes, and I don't include, nobody's got a quirky job. So I write those, and then I have a cold case series that follows on from my original cozy series, because my original cozy series woman got tired of finding dead bodies all the time. So now she's involved in a cold case unit. It's the most bizarre cold case unit in the world, because it's an 85-year-old woman and a retired receptionist. So it's not like it would never exist in the real world, but it exists in my world. And so those aren't strictly cozy, but they're mostly cozy. I have a cozy thriller series, which is a category that does not exist, but it does in my world. And that follows a retired school teacher who married a retired spy, and she now gets caught up in his adventures. So they went on their honeymoon, and he disappeared on day 1 because he had to help save a life. So she manages to talk her way into being involved in the case. Of course, she saves the day, and then the top secret agency ends up using them for other assignments on a very selective basis until they get kind of fired, but not. And,
Wow. Wow.
I also write romance under this pen name, not very successfully.
Have you not pushed it as hard? What do you ascribe the lesser success to?
Partly. Okay, so the original romance series was set on the Isle of Man, which is where most of my cozies are set. And it was their success that drove me, not success, minor success, that drove me to set the first mysteries on the Isle of Man, because it kind of gives it a USP, a unique selling point. Like, not a lot of people are writing books on the Isle of Man. Yeah. And I have a master's degree in the history of the island, so I could talk about all of the historical sites and the island's history. I could talk all day about that. It just fascinates me. So it was a cool place to set the first mystery. Those first romances aren't my best work. They're still out there for historical reasons and people still read them. But I think now I have a reader base of people who read cozies, and the crossover between the people who read romance and the people who read cozies is not great. So I have a handful of readers who read everything that I write, who read the romances anyway. I started a new romance series set in a fictional town in Western New York, which is where I am now. And I have maybe 500 to 1,000 readers who are happy to read those too. They're later in life mysteries, so their main characters are all in their 40s and older. But I've struggled with promoting them. And what happens, because I should have probably spun off a whole other pen name. I wanted to keep the Diana Xarissa for anything set on the Isle of Man. And now that I've built up that pen name, I need to keep it there. But it's hard to promote because all my also bots are all cozy mysteries, and it makes it a little bit of a, I've done a little bit of promotion. I haven't done a ton of promotion on them either. Again, I put my time and my effort into what's actually working for me. Mm-hmm. So if they had done a little bit better, I probably would have put more time and effort into advertising and promoting them. But then I got an idea for a new cozy series, which I've started, and then I got another one and then another one. So I have 3 new cozy series starting this year. Again, not all of them are strictly cozy. Mm-hmm. But they're in that area.
Yeah. How would you define strictly cozy?
So amateur detective, small town setting, no swearing, no violence on screen. I mean, obviously there's a dead body, but you don't see the murder. You can mention there was blood. That's about it, the limit of the graphicness of it. Mm-hmm. No sex. If there is a romantic entanglement, it's all fade to black. There's no, and that's the sort of traditional definition of cozy. So typically the main character was older. They don't have to be. Cozies now have kind of evolved. Paranormal cozy is very big. I have a paranormal cozy series. Mine is very light on the paranormal. So one of the characters is a ghost, but besides that, it's pretty otherwise normal. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of people writing witches and fairies, and witches are huge. So paranormal is big. And then like young quirky characters who move into a new town and have like quirky jobs, or I love them. I read them, but I don't write that way. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Did you find, I'm not looking to write romance, but I'm intrigued. Did you enjoy writing the romances or really not?
Some of them I really loved. Like some of them I really, really enjoyed. Okay. I find romances a lot harder to plot.
Okay.
My problem is conflict. In order to write a really good romance, you need your main characters to, there has to be the happy meeting and some going along, and then something has to drive them apart. Mm-hmm. So you can bring them back together. And I have a hard time making characters unlikable. Mm-hmm. I have a hard time like giving them good reasons to break up. So like I did a couple of books and they were okay, like they made sense. And then I was like struggling to find ways for them to break up. So many times when they break up, you feel like, well, all I really need to do is sit down and talk to each other for 2 minutes and it would all be cleared up. So it has to be bigger than that. And that's where my struggle with romance is. That's why I find romance really harder to write. So I've put the romance on hold for now. I have, like I said, I have some people who read it and enjoyed it and would like more books. I have one that I wrote as a short story for an anthology that did not get accepted like 3 years ago that I could stretch out to novel length. There was enough there, I think, but eventually, again, I put it on hold because the other stuff is where I make my money.
Yeah.
I have to say that I love the Netflix cozy kind of stories they do around Christmas. This year there was one really good one, A Castle for Christmas with Brooke Shields in it. That I just always loved that genre. And I actually have a story idea, but I don't know if I should pick a female pen name to write it. I don't know if it could really go anywhere with a guy's name on it.
So I know several men who write cozies. I also know several men who write romance. And what you have to decide is how far you're prepared to go to hide your identity. Like my one friend is completely behind he uses some like animated or drawn pictures of what's the word? Like cartoon people to represent himself on his bios, and he's 100% committed to being behind this wall, and doesn't reveal anything. Now, my other friend who writes cozies it's a sort of gender neutral pen name, has now sort of come out and admitted on some of his author groups that he's a man writing cozies. And doesn't seem to have hurt his business in the slightest. Also, Steve Higgs is huge right now, and he's not hiding behind a female pen name, and he's writing a ton of cozies. I can think of a few others as well. I'm not sure what their pen. I personally, I use a pen name because I hate my real name. It's just genuinely don't like my real first name, and I did not want to embarrass my husband if the books didn't sell at all by using my real last name. But if it were me, I would say write under a male name. If you want to use a pen name, that's fine, but it doesn't. Readers are a lot more accepting now than they were even a few years ago of men writing as women or writing stories that are typically considered. I think women are more accepting than men.
Yeah.
I feel like you can write a cozy, but I feel like women who are trying to write hard sci-fi are having a bit of a struggle. I don't know if you're familiar with Mal Cooper.
No.
Okay, Mal writes hard sci-fi, and when she came out as transgender, she lost half her audience.
Really?
Men did not want to read
hard
sci-fi by a woman, or maybe just a transgender woman. I don't know.
I'm highly disappointed in my fellow sci-fi fans then. So I thought we were all very progressive that way.
Yeah, that's a pretty standard kind of response. I think men can't stand to think, especially if it's a man who became a woman, they can't stand to think of what happened in that process.
Well, the thing with Mal,
I'm generalizing, Mark. I'm not including you in that.
Well, I just don't think about it. That's what I don't want to think about. You want to? Hey, go for it.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing with Mal's books is they all feature really strong female protagonists. It's not like she was writing, these big burly military men. She was writing strong female characters from the get-go. And men were reading them and loving them when they thought it was a man writing it. And then when she said, actually, I'm a transgender woman, they all went, we don't like what you do.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that the
Well, I know for this series, I have a transgender character, and I have a I guess she would be an ex-sister-in-law that's transgender. So I asked her to read the story just to make sure I didn't totally screw it up. It's, I'm writing from privilege, and I've never experienced that, so just want to make sure I didn't mess it up. But I, I don't know. I thought the world had moved to a better place, but apparently it hasn't.
Yeah, I thought it had on a number of subjects, Mark, and apparently it hasn't. So, yeah. What did she say? Did she give you a passing grade?
Well, she loved book number 1, and she got through part of book number 2, and then she's been ghosting me ever since. So I don't know.
Oh, you don't know why she's doing it, right?
No, and I've kind of sent her messages on Facebook, and I'm about to the point where I'm going to message our mutual nieces to see what happened.
Oh, wow. Well, that's too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, you never know. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I would suggest if you write a cozy and you have a female main character, that you find yourself some really solid beta readers who read and love the genre. Men are not always the best at writing female characters. And I'm saying this because somebody I know just was talking about their new book, and I went and looked at it, and 3 sentences in, the 2 women were having a conversation about their boobs. And I thought, women do not do that. Did you have a woman read this book? Is there a woman in your life that could look at this and be like, this is not how women talk? Mm-hmm. So please, for your own benefit, have a woman read it. But there are tons of female cozy lovers who would probably love to read it and give you an opinion. My friend who, like I said, who's just come out as male, with his cozy pen name, doesn't have any of those issues. Like, I read his books and I'm like, yeah, this is actually how women do talk. So he's probably more in touch with his feminine side than maybe this other person.
Well, I have a little bit of an advantage over other men that I grew up with 3 sisters, and I had 3 daughters, and I'm kind of an observer anyway. I'm in the background observing, so a lot of times I'll be with a group of women and it's like I'm not there, and they're just interacting as they would. And sometimes it's actually a little insulting, but that's okay.
It's actually a vote of trust that they treat you that way.
That's the way I look at it. Yeah.
That's kind of like being, and you would have gone through this, Diana, being the driver of the van full of teenagers. They forget that you're right there. I can hear,
I learned a lot more about you learn everything you need to know about your kids' lives when you're driving them places, and they can't get out, and you ask them a question and they're like, or they've got their friends in the back and you get to hear
stuff. Yeah, I was just laughing with my 40-year-old son on this weekend. I said, you remember that camping trip we were on? And we talked about it a bit. I said, the other thing I remember from that is I was in my own tent, of course, because they were all teenage boys. They all thought that their tents were soundproof.
They would.
I said there was a really interesting discussion of homosexuality and I told him which 2 characters, and I said they knew nothing about what they were talking about, but they were trying to figure it out. I mean, it was hilarious. So same kind of thing. And maybe a little bit like you, Mark. You said you're an observer. I've always classified myself as that, but I use the words that I'm always watching the subtext. And just like you mentioned, both of you earlier in the conversation, I had no idea that other people don't do that. No idea. Yeah. And I'll say something to someone afterwards. Oh man, she was so mad. What? She was mad? Yeah, she's probably killing someone right now, but
No, I've been in the middle of a conversation that made me uncomfortable, but I didn't want to say anything because I knew if I kind of spoke up, they'd all suddenly realize, oh, there's a man here.
There's a man here, right? Yeah, well, there's lessons for us all everywhere, aren't there? Yeah. Well,
I want to thank you for coming and talking to us, Diana. I'm sorry the rest of my group couldn't make it, but I'm gonna.
Well, I'm really glad that I did. It's just been really enlightening and interesting to be able to listen to you. I would never be able to write at the speed and volume that you do, but that's fine because I fit it into my life in a different way. But I learned a huge amount, and it's very generous of you to spend your time with us. Thank you.
Yes,
Well,
very much so. Thank you.
you're both very welcome. I love talking to other authors. It's like my favorite, the best part of writing. Indie authors are an amazing group of people, and I go to as many conferences as I can just to spend time with them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, that's good to know. Good to think about.
Yeah,
So thank you very much, and Mark for setting it up.
you're always welcome. I'll include you on the link if you want to join us. You're always welcome.
Mm-hmm.
I might surprise you and pop in one of these days.
Well, I hope you do.
Thank
Thank you.
Diana. Thanks,
Thank
Mark.
you.
All right. Thank you again. Bye
No
bye.
problem. Thank you. Bye.